Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's lecture by Ronnie Walsh on the Leeds Victoria Cross holder, Charles Ward. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ronnie. Over to you, Ronnie.
Good evening, everybody. As my introductory slide says, this is about a talk this evening about Queen Victoria's last Victoria Cross, who just happened to be a Leeds lad, affectionately known as a Leeds Loiner. Before we go into the talk, I'd just like to introduce myself, really. I've been retired from work since 2021. I moved to Leeds in 1995. I've had careers in banking and working in the NHS. I've got a great history. I've got a great interest in history, especially social history, and especially around this period between Victorian and Edwardian times. In me spare time, because I've got loads of spare time now, of course, because I'm retired. I volunteer as an archivist with West Yorkshire Archives. I'm currently on a project with them, which it'll never finish in my lifetime, where I'm indexing the surgeon ledgers for patients who were treated at the Leeds General Infirmary between 1880 and 1918. And before I start with the lecture, I'd just like to actually make a few acknowledgements, really, to a number of people who've helped me along the way. I've got my missus for giving me the space and time to indulge myself in the research required for this talk. A lady called Sylvia Craven from Leeds Teaching Hospitals Trust, Mick Ward, Letitia and Martin Gillies, Clive Fennell and their family, Mark Smith from BBC Antiques Roadshow, Vicky Grindrod and the West Yorkshire Archives team, gentleman from Cardiff called Kerry Stennett, who I refer to as my man in Cardiff. He does he's done a lot of work for me based around Charles's life in Cardiff. St Mary's Parish Church in the community of Whitchurch, the current Lord Moynihan, two chaps from the medal collecting world, a guy called Christopher Mellor Hill and Harry Blackett Ord, the Thoresby Society, and also the Sandgate Society. So what is a Leeds Loiner? Well, a Leeds Loiner is a person from Leeds and who's proud of that fact. And although the origin of the name is, or the origin of the word is unknown, I like the one origin where it goes back to the old a take on the old Leeds name, which back in the 8th century it was known as Loedus. So I'd like to think that that's where it's actually been taken from. So yeah, reduce that. Sorry about this.
Technology eludes us.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes.
So on the hedgerow, not too far from us, is this bronze plaque. Now the distinction is this bronze plaque that there's 17 names on it. These 17 names are gentlemen who are either born in Leeds or are actually buried in Leeds, but they all have one thing in common. And the fact is that they're all recipients of the Victoria Cross, and Charles's name is on that plaque. Charles lived for he was only 44 when he passed away, and in that time he'd served his country twice. He'd been received by 2 reigning monarchs, and he was awarded the country's highest award for gallantry, which is obviously the Victoria Cross. Now, a little bit of history on the Victoria Cross. it was instigated in 1857 by Queen Victoria, and at the outset of it, there were 62 which were awarded. They were like sort of backdated, if you wish. And one of the 62 recipients, hopefully his great grandson, is actually online this evening to actually watch this. Now, Queen Victoria personally bestowed 185 out of the 427 Victoria Crosses, which were gazetted during her reign. But the significance of Charles's is that his was the last one that she personally gave to the recipient. The unique thing about Charles's cross is that his was the first Victoria Cross which was actually won by a member of the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry. So how I became involved in the Charles Ward story. So as I alluded to earlier, on the project that I'm actually working on with West Yorkshire Archives, I was sat doing one of Berkeley Moynihan's medical record ledgers. Berkeley's the chap who's on the right hand side here, and I came across a medical record which had the name Charles Ward on it. Charles is obviously the guy on the left there, and you can see, what a young lad he was at the time that he won his VC. Now, when you look at the stop there. So that's the medical record that I came across. As you can see, the demographics of it just says Charles Ward, age 23, and his occupation soldier. And he's been seen by a guy called Mr. Brown, but it's for Mr. Moynihan, who was the honorary consultant surgeon at the time. And the fact that he's got ulnar nerve paralysis to what is his left arm. And he's living at number 10 Ascairn Place in Hunslet. Now, fortunately, we've actually got a picture of Ascairn Place. And Charles's house, number 10, is the second one down on the right-hand side. So you can see his background is very much a working class lad. Now, when I went into the record itself, it actually mentions again what the complaint is. It's a weakness and loss of sensation in his left arm, and it's been like that for 8.5 months. Now, the details of the present illness, it said last June on the 26th, 1900, he was shot in the Anglo-Boer War at Lindley, Orange Republic colony near Kroonstad. Entrance wounds on the inner side of the bicep and the exit wounds on the outer side. So I got to thinking, there's a reason why they've actually mentioned the date and why they've mentioned the place. So I did a little bit of further research, and it turned out that he was a Victoria Cross winner, which totally blew me away, But the good thing about the medical record is it's telling us something that we've never ever known about the injury and how it occurred. And when you put into context the citation for the Victoria Cross, obviously, I mean, the fact that he was the bullet wound has actually entered the inside of his arm. He's obviously in the process. He's in the process of actually running, which again bears reference to the way the citation reads. But for it to actually hit where it hit, I mean, he was so close to being fatally wounded. It must have brushed him, either his front or his back, Now, the two guys actually formed, Berkeley Moynihan and Charles Ward. They formed a bit an acquaintance. They'd never ever met before, but the significance of the meeting for me is the fact that Berkeley Moynihan's father was actually a Victoria Cross winner himself. He won a Victoria Cross in 1855, and we had this unique coming together of these two guys. One, the son of a Victoria Cross winner, treating a Victoria Cross winner. That's probably never happened, and is unlikely to happen, I would say. But following the treatment and during the First World War, Burley Moynihan and Charles both did a lot of recruiting around the Leeds area, and one method that they actually did was by using a tram. So the tram would literally go round the city centre and basically encouraging lads to join up. And we've got a picture of Burley in front of the tram there. He's in his civilian clothes. And again, we've got a newspaper article here which says an appeal was made at the close of the second performance at the Empire Theatre by Sir Burley Moynihan, who introduced to the audience Sergeant Major Ward VC, a Leeds man who won the VC during the South African War. What we tend to find is that during the First World War, the British Army were quite clued into the fact that if they used the valour of other guys, it would encourage people to actually join up. So Charles wasn't alone. He used other Victoria Cross winners to actually come in and speak with people and encourage them to actually join up, you know. So we'll now talk about Charles's early life. Now, he was born on the 10th of July, 1876. And we've got his actual birth certificate here. He's registered at number 5 Tulip Street. And what's interesting is, if you look at the signature of his mum there, rather than being able to sign a name, she's just placed her mark there, which when you look at a lot of these old census records and a lot of birth certificates and marriage bands, you tend to find this quite a lot back then. It seemed that work was more important than you know, having an education, but obviously, you know, you need to live first and foremost. And we fortunately got a picture of Tulip Street here. And number 5 Tulip Street is the second house on the left-hand side there. This picture was taken in the 1960s. Sadly, the terraced house is no longer there. So this is a reference to Charles's 1891 census return. And you see at the time, Charles is just 14 years of age. But by this time, he's actually left school. He left school at 12. And he's working with his mum. The both of them are actually nail makers. Such is the way it was back then. You know, you needed to be working as early as you could. Now, whilst Charles did leave school at 12, his affection for the 2 schools that he went to, which was Jack Lane and Primrose Hill, when he was awarded his Victoria Cross and came back to Leeds, he never forgot the times that he was at school. One of the first things that he did, literally just 4 days after his award ceremony at Windsor Castle, the first appointment that he made was a visit to Jack Lane School to actually see the children. So he clearly never forgot the short time that he was in school. And his mother later acknowledged in a news article that Charles was always reading and he had a way with words. And in later life, you know, his letters home and his public speaking actually bears that out. So we move forward now to his military career. What we've got here is his attestation forms for when he joined the militia, which is probably the forerunner of the Territorial Army now. So he joined the militia on the 11th of January 1897, and he's 19 years old at this point. What we've actually got, fortunately, these forms actually give you a description of the actual recruit. So we've got Charles as being 5'6". He weighs 123 pounds. He's just under 9 stone. He's got a sallow complexion, blue eyes, and light brown hair. Now, 4 months after that, clearly the militia was not enough for Charles, so he joins the army properly, and he ended up joining the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry on the 29th of April 1897. And in May of 1899, he's actually transferred abroad to South Africa. And in 1901, his career is cut short by what happened with him. and he's discharged, which I find the wording that they use is quite direct, really. Medically unfit for further service, but it doesn't elaborate on the reason why he's medically unfit for further service. So we come to the actual day of his action. He's based at a place called Kroonstad, which is just outside a small town called Lindley. Now on the map there, Lindley is just south of Johannesburg, and as you can see, it's just a place just in the middle of nowhere. So it must have been quite an amazing contrast for him, coming from Hunslet, which is a highly industrialised part of Leeds, to basically the roving savannas of South Africa. Must have been quite a culture change, really. Now, his actual citation, it reads as follows. So, on the 26th of June 1900 at Lindley, a picket of the Yorkshire Light Infantry, which is a small group of soldiers, was surrounded on three sides by about 500 Boers at close quarters. The two officers were wounded, and all but 6 of their men were killed or wounded. Private Ward then volunteered to take a message asking for reinforcements to the signalling station about 150 yards in the rear of the post. His offer was at first refused, owing to the practical certainty of his being shot. But on in his insisting, he was allowed to go. He got across untouched through a storm of shots from each flank, and having delivered his message, he voluntarily returned from a place of absolute safety and recrossed the fire-swept ground to assure his commanding officer that the message had been sent. On this occasion, he was severely wounded, but for this gallant action, the post would certainly have been captured. And the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry Museum at Doncaster have actually got the tunic that he wore on the day that he was, that he was involved in the action for which he won the Victoria Cross. And you can see quite clearly there the bullet wound in his left arm. I mean, to actually think that we've still got such a historical item is just fantastic. So having been wounded in the way that he was he was sent to a field dressing station, and these actual images from his own personal scrapbook. These have never ever been seen before, and you can just make out the picture in the bottom right hand corner. Charles is on the right hand side there with his arm in a sling, and in the picture above him, he's on the left hand side again with his arm in a sling. Obviously, these pictures are very, very old. They're 120 years old, and they've faded sadly. But in his own hand, he's written Kroonstad on the image in the bottom left, which is obviously one of the nurses that was looking after him. So, having been treated there for approximately 5 or 6 weeks, he's returned to England. He actually comes back on the 8th of October 1900 on one of the Wedge Star Line ships, RMS Britannic, and he arrives at Southampton on the 29th of October. He spends approximately 6 weeks at this place, which is called the Alfred Bevan Convalescent Home, which is just outside Folkestone. And you can see there's an image of Charles on the left-hand side there in his uniform. And the interesting thing about this is when you look at the image of the home and you look at him, you can actually see where the steps are leading down to the beach. On the left-hand side is where that picture was actually taken, which I find quite interesting, really, to think, that you can actually place him in a position in a home at the time. So from the nursing home, he's actually coming home to Leeds. He arrives in Leeds on the 8th of December 1900, and he was not prepared for what met him. Basically, Leeds came to a standstill that day. He was basically, lauded by tens of thousands of people. Local sport was affected. I mean, there was even mentions in the local papers of like rugby matches, their attendances were a lot lower than what they normally would have been, all down to the fact of this particular homecoming. Now, the procession that he had, because he actually had a procession that day, it consisted of Leeds dignitaries and senior British Army staff, and he's also escorted by 40 members of the 1st Battalion of the Yorkshire Light Infantry. And in addition to that, the people of Leeds, from when they got word of him having been awarded the Victoria Cross, between then and him coming home, they basically just got together and by public subscription, they raised a £600 annuity fund for him. And they also presented him with a gold medal on behalf of the city. Now, whilst we don't know the whereabouts of the gold medal, Charles actually kept in his own scrapbook the notice where the medal must have been on display at Leeds Town Hall in the time leading up to this day. And Charles actually kept the notice for it, saying that this gold medal to be presented to him. So clearly, winning the award and everything that came as a result of that was very, very important to him, because he's just kept all kinds of things, which is great for us 120 years on. Now, the procession actually came, it started in Quebec Street, for obviously us in the Leeds audience tonight. Started in Quebec Street and actually came across Commercial Street and past the Leeds Library, where we are tonight, before turning right down into Briggate and then making its way to Hunslet, where Charles was from. And the procession actually finished at this place called the Grove Hotel. Now, the significance of that is that the Grove Hotel, one of the people who were in charge, one of the committee members for Charles' annuity fund, was the manager, was the owner of the Grove Hotel. So they actually put on a big spread for him and him and his family. And following that, there were literally tens of thousands of people. This whole street was just mobbed. So he came out to them and did a talk, and such as how you hear the typical behaviours of a Victoria Cross recipient, as how modest and how much humility they have. When he's actually talking, we've actually got the quotes of what he said at the time, and you can see them, the modesty and the humility in what he was saying. He said that he was highly honoured by the flattering reception that he'd received, and that he was only one of the Atkins family, and he cannot speak to this company as he would like. So he was very, very nervous of the amount of people that had come out to see him. He's only done his duty, I understate it. And there are many more who would do the same in South Africa if it comes to the pinch. So, he's basically saying that, I'm not the only one who'd have done this. There'd have been loads of other lads. So from his homecoming, he actually is asked to attend Windsor Castle on the 15th of December. And he attends the White Drawing Room, and this is an image what it would have looked like at the time. Really, we've got Queen Victoria and Albert there, but this is what the White Drawing Room would have looked like at the time that Charles was being awarded his Victoria Cross. So the ceremony took place on Saturday, the 15th of December at 5 o'clock. Queen Victoria actually writes in her journal that she's actually given 5 VCs at 5. That's how she worded it. So there were 5 Victoria Crosses and a Distinguished Service Order given out that day. The unique thing about this, which sets Charles's medal apart, is that when the 5 Victoria Crosses were given, the order of ceremony that day was that whenever there was more than 1 Victoria Cross given out, they were actually given out in rank order. So because Charles was a private, his was the last Victoria Cross to actually be given out, which turned out to be quite a significant thing when you take into account the fact that 5 weeks later, Queen Victoria had passed away, and she never gave out, another VC. But one thing that makes you see how much Victoria regarded herself with the Victoria Cross is that she was so ill that she was actually wheeled into the drawing room. She could just, she couldn't stand there to come and kneel to her, and talk was very frail that day. But she was still she still thought it as a sense of duty that she had to be the one to actually be given the award out. Now, unfortunately, due to technical issues, we can't actually look at this, but I'll just explain to it briefly what it is. The Mitchell and Kenyon reel, what that refers to is back in 1994 in Blackburn, offices were being, these old buildings were being refurbished by the shop fitters, and they broke into the cellar of this place, which back in the early 1900s used to be the offices of a company called Mitchell and Kenyon. And Mitchell and Kenyon were they were photographers and filmmakers who would make film of everyday life, predominantly in the north of England. And they found two like bins just packed full of old reels. So when they actually looked at these reels, that's what they found. But one of the actual films was an interview, a silent interview with Charles, which was taken just after he was awarded his Victoria Cross, but we're unable to show that, unfortunately. So when he's actually come back to Leeds, he's literally gone from this, working class lad who's joined the army, who's done this fantastic deed, and he's like an A-list celebrity, this fella. He's invited to all kinds of functions. There's matinees, there's evening shows that are put on his behalf, and again, he feels so privileged with this that he's kept all of these. These are all invites that Charles has kept himself. These are all from his personal scrapbook. So, I mean, the one on the left there, the Lord Mayor of Leeds, requested pleasure in company of Private Ward, dinners at the town hall. There's a show going on, complimentary benefits as Private Ward at the Coliseum in Leeds, a grand concert, grand social. These are all in his name. Special afternoon performance, Private Ward. Even local businesses. I mean, this guy was a tobacconist in Hunslet, and you just look at that letter and you see the time that he's taken, that he's invested in actually writing this to him. I mean, to Private Ward, we've seen all the different, the different inks that he's used. Kindly accept this box of cigars as a small token of my admiration for your gallant conduct in South Africa. And he probably wasn't alone. There was probably a lot of people who were actually doing this for him. So, having left the army, he settles down to civilian life now in Leeds. So Charles opens a corner shop on Church Street in Hunslet. And in October of 1903, he accepts a position as a drill instructor with Leeds Education and a salary of £70 per annum. Charles marries his first wife, Emily Kay, at the parish church Hunslet on the 6th of October 1904. Now, Emily's 21 and she's 6 years younger than Charles at this time. By the end of 1904, Charles and Emily put the business up for sale and they relocate to Cardiff. Charles accepts a position of physical instructor with Glamorgan City Council Education on a salary of £140 a year, so he's literally doubled his money there. Which is equivalent to about £14,500 in today's money. So what you take into account is his income, his annuity fund, and his army pension. He was quite a wealthy guy at the time, really. The interesting thing about this is when I've researched the family, is that despite them living in Cardiff from 1904, their first three children, Lillian, Edith, and Charles Llewellyn, are all born in Leeds. So Emily is moving back to have her children in Leeds, and then moving back to Cardiff. So clearly the Leeds, the Yorkshire connection is quite a strong one. And speaking from personal experience there, I can understand why they think like that, because obviously you can tell from my accent that I'm not a Leeds lad, but I still have a lot of affection, a lot of regard from where I come from. So they have a fresh start in Cardiff. The only thing that I can gather from why they've done that is, I think, because of the celebrity status that he had, I don't think he got a moment to himself really. So I think over a period of time, that's probably gradually worn thin to the extent where they've said, I think we should have a clean break here, move away somewhere where we're not as well known and we won't get as bothered, sort of thing. As I say, they have a fresh start in Cardiff. After moving about in a few places in Cardiff, we settle into what I would say would be their forever home. Really, this is 3 Soberton Avenue, and this is where Charles and Emily actually ended up living. Which, I mean, it's quite a lovely property even today. So it must have been quite a place to purchase back then, really. And when you look at the old maps of the area, I think they were the first people in there because it was only built around the time that they moved into Cardiff. So the likelihood is that they were the first people to live there. And we've got the 4 children there as well. And I've got another image of them a little later on. This is pictures again from Charles's scrapbook where he's basically at work now. He's working with the children and doing gymnastics. And it's just great to see him there. There he is on the right-hand side. And you just see the back of him there. So obviously his work was very important to him. So 1914 comes, First World War breaks out. War's declared on the 4th of August. By the 10th of September, Charles re-enlists, despite him obviously being discharged from the army in 1901 as being unfit for service. You must see it as an act of duty that he has to go and rejoin the army. So he joins the army on the 10th of September with the rank of private, and his rise through the ranks is rapid. I mean, in just over a month, he's promoted to corporal, then sergeant, and then colour sergeant. He's basically becomes a member of the army gymnastics staff, and he drill instructs the new recruits, and he also works in various offices throughout mainly the north of England in recruitment, and he does spend some time also in France. So throughout the duration of the war, he just moved everywhere. So we've got a picture of him here in his colour sergeant's uniform, and we've got an image of Charles with Emily and his 4 children. So looking at it left to right there, we've got Edith, Lillian, Charles, Dorothy, then we've got Emily and Charles Llewellyn. And you can see although he was only short in stature, he was a big fit lad, but from being a drill instructor as well. He's actually discharged from the army on the 21st of November of 1918, and his rank at that point was warrant officer, class 2, colour sergeant major. Now we've got quite a funny story, which is a letter which was written to the Leeds Mercury in 1939. So this is way after Charles had passed away, and it was before the onset of the Second World War. And this guy writes regarding a topic at the time, and it involves Charles, and I found it quite funny that I thought I'd let it say it tonight. So the title of the letter was BC Humorist, Steering a Recruit into the Light Infantry. And the letter says, Sir, a delegate at some assembly the other day suggested placing all the elderly men, and especially those with previous military service, in the van in the event of war. While fully appreciating the self-sacrifices shown by giving up place of honour to such as me, I see objections to acceptance. Personally, I should experience the utmost difficulty in apostrophes, assuming the prone position when firing, which is musket regulations part 1. And I'm sure I should cause congestion in the trenches. It is true I should afford considerable cover to some of those behind. Not the delegate, he would be too far behind, but I still object. When the Great War broke out, I was already on shell work at Hadfields and Sheffield, and I well remember some of my workmates using a similar argument to the delegate man in order to stimulate my patriotism. It's men like you with war experience that they want in the trenches, they said. So I took their advice. Colour Sergeant Major Charles Ward, VC of Hunslet, was on the recruiting staff in Sheffield, and knowing him well as a very dry humorist at the First Order, it caused me no surprise when he suggested that I should join the Yorkshire Light Infantry. I weighed 16.5 stone, but he meant it, and forthwith led me into the recruiting office at the bottom of the rag market. The medical officer sat at a little table. Charlie shoved me onto a little weighing machine with a limited capacity of 15 stone. And the indicator whizzed round the dial and stopped with a quiver at the terminal. It had done its best. This guy could write a letter, couldn't he? 14 stone 2, sir, sang out Charlie, unabashed, and pulled me away. But today, alas, my chances of slipping in are slender. I've put on a couple of stones since the good old light infantry days. Anyway, my lad is carrying on the family tradition. He says he prefers khaki to politics. Yours, Thomas Creasy, April 17th, 1939. Now, it just shows you as well the degree of flexibility that the recruiting staff were given during the First World War. But the fact that he could feel comfortable in actually doing that, even though the guy was clearly not of the right weight, it didn't matter because he was probably thinking ahead, Charles, in that his square bashing will probably reduce his weight quite quickly. So, I just found that quite funny, to be honest. Charles is actually he leaves the army in November 1918, and between November 1918 and December 1921 proved to be about as tragic a time for the Ward family as you could possibly get. Charles and Emily's relationship went through a real traumatic breakdown, and it culminated in events of Thursday, the 27th of February 1919. Emily leaves Charles a note and leaves the house. The note said, "I'm leaving your house forever, and I never wish to see you again. I know I've done wrong, and you can take what action you like. I hope you will take no action against the soldier I was speaking to last Sunday night. Signed, E. Ward." And she actually addressed the letter to Mr. Ward, VC, not to Charlie or Charles, not to her husband or anything. That's how strained things had become. And what happened? She takes herself to a level crossing and throws herself in front of a train, and basically killed herself. Just such a sad time. And when you think, they had 4 young children as well. So in September of 1919, Charles had remarried for the second time. His wife was Annie McAnally, and between September 19 and February 1920, Charles is suffering terribly with his mental health, and unbeknownst to the medical staff at the time, he was clearly suffering with post-traumatic stress disorder from not only his time in the Boer War, but obviously things that he'd seen when he was over in France during the First World War. So sadly, Charles is issued, he's actually admitted to Bridgend Asylum on the 12th of February 1920, and he's discharged on the 8th of May 1920. Now, I've actually been fortunate enough to have access to the medical record for Charles at the time that he was admitted to the asylum, and it makes for quite tragic reading. He's talking about he's found Jesus, he's got snakes crawling all over him. His son and him have both got the signs of Jesus on their body. He's visited planets, he's visited stars. He's becoming very aggressive. He smashes up an actual ward in the asylum, breaks windows. And when you think, like, you can see, I mean, Charles is in his early 40s there, and he's a big, stocky guy, and he's obviously not of sound mind. He must have been really, really tough to actually keep under control. So they must have had a real terrible time with him, unfortunately. But when he's actually discharged, he's recovered on the 8th of May 1920. But sadly, he's readmitted on the 4th of November, and he remained in there until he passed away on the 29th of December 1920 at 10:50 in the morning. But the thing about this, and it goes back to when he was the fact that he's a Victoria Cross recipient. Between his 2 admissions to the asylum Um, in June of 1920, King George V actually hosted a garden party at Buckingham Palace, and it was to honour the 300 and odd still living Victoria Cross recipients. And Charles was obviously invited to that. So despite him not being well, he still had this sense of duty that he had to go. You know, he had to go and actually show up for, you know, him and his comrades, and also his king and queen. But the point is here about the actual time when it took place. The actual garden party was on the 26th of June 1920, which was exactly 20 years to the day that he was involved in the action for which he won his Victoria Cross. So quite what was going through his head at the time, God only knows, you know. As I say, we've got a picture of Charles there. This was actually taken upon his readmission to the asylum in November of 1920. When you look at the two pictures there, I mean, they're taken 20 years apart. He's aged so much, hasn't he, really? It's his eyes for me. You know, they just, I think the Charles Ward that everybody knew is probably long gone there. So he's buried at St Mary's Church in Whitchurch on the 3rd of January 1921. His funeral service received full military honours, and he was attended by his immediate family. And we actually have an image of Charles' coffin on the back of a carriage being taken to the cemetery. So, you know, at least, you know, he was given the send-off that he deserved, really. Now, when he was actually buried, his grave was marked with just a wooden cross, and his family did attend the grave regularly, because not long after all this happened, the family did move away, but they still did return and you know, come and see him. But over the years, you know, the cross was lost, and the site of the actual location of the grave was lost for like a 60-year period. And it was only in the mid-80s a group of local historians down in Whitchurch in Cardiff actually found Charles's grave, and you know, they got together, and through the Royal British Legion, they got a commemorating stone, and that's an image from 1986, whereby the stone's being laid at Charles's grave, and he's given a military service there, and that's Charles's grave today in Whitchurch Cemetery. And the thing about Whitchurch is a community. Certainly now, he's high in their regard. I mean, they had a service to mark the 100 years of his burial. I actually attended that, and it was quite a moving thing. And they did you know, a service at his gravesite as well. But even now, the local historian, the local history societies and all that, whenever they do talks and walks, they always include Charles in the criteria there, and you know, in the talks themselves. So, having done all this work, I got to be thinking, where is the Victoria Cross? Because more often than not, these things are either in collections somewhere, or you know, they're with regimental museums. But all I could find with regard to Charles's Victoria Cross is that it was privately held. That's all it said on the Victoria Cross Association's website. Is that the location of it is that it was privately held. So I thought, who's got it? Where is it? You know, because not only was there the Victoria Cross, there were 3 other medals. There was his First World War Victory Medal, his First World War War Medal, his Queen's South Africa Medal, and the Victoria Cross. There was a medal group. So I got to I got to be delving into the world of medal collecting, which was an eye opener, to be honest. There were two companies that I actually spoke with, a company called Spink and a company called Dixon and Webb. And the reason I got in touch with Spink was because I found a newspaper article from 1976, which was the only reference I could find to the Victoria Cross being sold. And it was sold at Sotheby's and bought by Spink on behalf of one of their clients. But unfortunately, Spink's records from that period were not available for them to look at. So the trail went dead for it. So I got in touch with the company called Dixon and Webb, and I asked them if they were aware of who may have it. And quite sheepishly, they came back to me and he said, "Well, yeah, we do know who's got it." Well, that's the good news. But the bad news is, unfortunately, he's quite a private chap and he doesn't take kindly to being approached, certainly about his medal collection. So over the next 2 or 3 years, we had tentative communication between me, Dixon and Webb, and the current custodian of the Victoria Cross. And I would tease, I got to the extent, fortunately I had Charles' scrapbook in my locker, whereby I could provide him with the odd image of certain things, which showed him that I was a bona fide person, I had good dignity, and that I was someone he could trust. And I'm pleased to say that he released images for us of the medal group. So that's Charles's actual Victoria Cross there. Next to it is his Queen South Africa medal. And the next one along is the First World War medal. And the last one there is the Victory medal. I've had to blot out, if you can see there, the back of the Victoria Cross. And the reason for that is every Victoria Cross is unique in the way that it's been engraved. The only people who know what the image on the back is the recipient and Hancocks who actually make them. So his name, say like for example, the word private, with Charles's, it might be in all capitals. On the next medal, it might be a capital letter and in a lowercase, or there might be capitals within the context of the word. So they're all different. And if ever you wanted to know when you purchase one, have I bought a real Victoria Cross, is by taking it to Hancock's, and they will look in their little book, which goes back to the beginning of when it first started in the 1850s, and they'll tell you whether or not it's legit, purely by the fact that what's on the back of it. So we've got a funny little story, and it revolves the medal actually going to school. So picture the scene. We've got a young lad about 7 or 8 years of age in class one day, and his teacher's going around the class asking as to whether they've got any famous family members. So the young lad puts his hand up and mentions with the utmost pride that his grandfather was awarded the Victoria Cross. And the teacher didn't believe him. So the following day before school, he went to where his parents kept the medal, and unbeknownst to them, put it in the school bag, took it to school. So during lessons, he puts his hand up and says to his teacher that the previous day he was telling the truth. At which point he holds up the medal and says, "There you go." So needless to say, he was immediately taken on with the medal in order that it be returned to his parents. And there he is there. I'd like to introduce you all to Charles's grandson, Mick Ward. Take a bow, Mick.
Thank you. I will be around afterwards for asking us. So I have a bit of memorabilia I can show people as well.
Cheers, man. So that's my chat. I hope you enjoyed it. I love the story. I think it's got everything. It's got the bravery and it's got the tragedy. And I'm open to any questions if you wish.
Just bring the mic. The people on Zoom can hear if you speak. You should have.
It was just to say, I might have missed it, but how did you come across the scrapbook? Because that seems to have been the key to unlocking
Yeah, the way that we come across the scrapbook, me and Mick, we actually went down to Leicester where another of Charles's grandsons lives, a guy called Clive Fennell, and we sat with Clive and his wife Mick, didn't we? And whilst we were sat there, Clive gets up and he goes, "I won't be a minute. Something that you might be interested in." So, like, Clive's in his late 80s, like, so he shuffles out the room. And he comes back into the room with this old Woolworths bag. And he goes, "Here, have a look at that." So he puts it on the table and we, took it out the Woolworths bag. And that was the scrapbook. And God, the hairs on the back of my neck just went ding, to actually be able to access such an artifact. I mean, for me, I'd love that to be next to the tunic in the Coiling Museum. That's where it really should be. It's of museum quality, that thing. And I've never come across anything like that, any artifact like that in relation to the Victoria Cross that I might have seen and in museums or whatever. It's a totally unique object. But that's how we come across a film, yeah. Yeah. Anybody else?
So where did he serve in the First World War?
That is something that I've not been able to ascertain. Yeah. All I can see is that there's press reports of him having gone to the front.
Yeah.
I think the only way that I'd be able to do that is by accessing in detail his military record. Yeah. But he did instruct at Clipstone and he instructed at Pentra as well. But he did a lot. He did a hell of a lot of recruiting, in the Yorkshire area for the Yorkshire Light Infantry, but the exact whereabouts of his, I don't think he actually, although he may have gone to France, I don't think he actually served on the front, but I think he would have been involved in things to do with, obviously, the big push sort of thing.
But to get the victory medal, he must have been in a war zone.
Yeah. So he's obviously it's whereabouts in the war zone. Yeah. That's not something I'm aware of yet, Chris.
There are two questions on chat, Ronnie. The first is, was his admission to the asylum in any way related to his wife's suicide, do you think?
It could possibly have been. I mean, what was the because all that happened prior. The death happened prior to his wife.
And the other question was about his arm injury where he got the shot. Did his arm recover? Did he have to full use of it later in his life?
From what I can gather on the, I mean, certainly when you look at the video, if we were able to view that, you can see how he's holding his left arm, and it's literally, it looks like a dummy arm. It looks like a false arm that he's holding. But I mean, certainly for him to actually be able to do the job he did, I think he got virtually full mobility in later life with it. I mean, plus as well, when he came back within a couple of years in 1902, 1903, he was actually playing rugby for Ripon Vipers, I think it was. So I don't think it didn't limit him that much.
Thank you. I'm sure that's answered that question.
The lady at the back, please.
Yes.
I'm not sure whether you're going to ask that. Is the video available for us to watch on a website or
it is anywhere? If you go onto YouTube and if you just into the search engine Charles Ward VC, it'll actually come up.
Would you like to try and play it now? I don't know what the problem was before. That's why you couldn't try it.
Just go on YouTube. It takes a minute or two to load. I'll just say one thing while they're doing that, particularly in regards to the hospital admission at the end. Family history gives three different things. So clearly there's mental health in relation to what happened in his life. with his first wife commit suicide. Although I would point out, so he's my dad's dad. My dad was from his second wife, but at the time of his birth was not that long after his first wife committed suicide, which would suggest there were some other complications on his side. The second thing, I did also get with the medics, some of his medical records, and actually had some blood-borne illnesses that may have resulted in difficult behaviour, a bit similar to delirium, not delirium, but similar. And then there also, and this is where urban myths start, and family history gets confused. In our family, the story was he fell off a ladder and banged his head. Of those three, I think that's the least likely. But that's how families cope with those things.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, Mick, because in the Bridgend Asylum medical record, it mentioned that he fell off a roof and banged his head.
Well,
Yeah.
there is that. And then just one thing on the Victoria Cross. So yes, it was in our family home
To screen share that.
till I was about 8 or 9. And then our family sold it. We lived in a council estate in Leeds. It bought a new carpet and a couple of other things. We get a bit more now. But I remember in terms of urban myths, when we went to go see the family in Nottingham,
Yeah.
and we were explaining this history, and they were going, "Oh yes, we got £60,000 for it." And we went, "No, you've done the research. You had
Of
the
course,
exact
yeah.
figure. It was just under 3,000."
Yeah.
But somehow big families have their own view of the world. So one of the great things of Ronnie's involvement with this has been changing like family myths into reality. So I was brought up with part of this story, but I think through my teenage years I've just forgotten it, or almost it was just too not true. The whole, running back is always that's always got me. And all those urban myths around that, and then Ronnie's just shown what really happened, which was even more remarkable than the story I had as a child and the impact that would have had on my dad, who was also in Coyley as well through the Second World War, and the impact on the stuff happening to him, following in that shadow. And it explains so much about my dad. And just one final thing, sorry, about the video you're about to show, which is just incredible. They say this is a moving image in 1900. 4 years after the invention of cinema. Yeah, I bet, I have no moving images of my dad,
Yeah.
but he has the same mannerisms as my son. 2 generations apart. And
Wow.
clearly, I mean, I never met your granddad. This is just, show that. It's a bit of a slow start, I'm afraid. Just ignore this trailer. The company transferred it. Okay. It's silent, but I expect out. So the guy on the left doing the interview was a famous showman who hosted like carnivals, and they used to show it in huge tents alongside with little short snippets of film. And so obviously he's just going through what happened and how he was shot, etc.
I always believe that this has been the location of this. What Mitchell and Kenyon used to do is at the beginning of their reels, they'd actually write details of what the film was about and when it was taken and where it was taken. But annoyingly, on this one, they never did that. So we can only surmise that. I mean, looking at them, it looks like looks like a pub table with two chairs. And I'm thinking that this is done in the back of the Grove Hotel in Hunslet. I mean, after coming across his medical record and then just on a whim, just finding that, it was just unbelievable to actually find it. In fact, it's how I got in touch with yourself, Mick, wasn't it? Because you'd left your details in the comments, hadn't you? Yeah.
Many people saw that BBC made a series of documentaries about the Mitchell and Kenyon films. about what, 15 or 20 years ago, shortly after they were discovered in Blackburn. Then there was, 3 1-hour programmes that the BBC made, so, they're still available, certainly on DVD. And they did feature this film as part of that. But it was a very mixed set of films, very, very different. A lot of them were just ordinary, everyday life. Yeah.
Have you got much of his army record?
Well, the problem with it, Rich, is that during the Second World War, the building where the army records were held, it had a direct hit and a Luftwaffe, and a lot of it was destroyed. So
I can see from there he was a marksman. That badge that he wears down on his left arm.
oh yeah,
He was a marksman. And when he joined up the second time, they're crossed swords. That's PTI sign.
right,
But all that would be in his records where he'd been trained, what he'd done.
yeah,
A lot of the training, a lot of the really, really hard training, the retraining was done in France, which is, if he was a drill instructor, that's what he did.
that's where
And he really, really loved using commended men for recruitment, which is why he got promoted. And that's what they used in.
That's why he flew through the ranks
and hammered it. Yeah.
yeah.
But the work in France will have been that they were brutal in France. That was bad stuff. So he was one of those instructors.
That's great to have an insight like that. Cheers.
I've got all sorts of that, Ronnie.
Okay, that's it, I think. Well, thank you very much, Ronnie. That was a really interesting report.